Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be tackling something a lot of people struggle with, learning English.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, we have this personal story from someone named Ariel.
Okay.
It's called, this is so funny, the file is literally called 11.txt.
Right.
But it's really, really fascinating stuff. I think we're going to get a lot out of it today.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what Ariel has to share with us.
Yeah, and our mission today is to try to pull out those golden nuggets, the practical tips
Yeah.
that anyone listening can use on their own English language journey.
Absolutely. I think it can be really inspiring to hear personal stories
Mm-hmm.
of how people have tackled this sometimes daunting task of learning a new language.
Yeah, and one thing that really struck me was how Ariel really emphasizes this idea of patience.
Okay.
Like, it's not a sprint, it's more like a marathon.
That's so important. And it's something that I talk about a lot with my students, too.
Right.
Because it's easy to get caught up in wanting to be fluent right away.
Right.
But the reality is that language learning takes time.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really more about enjoying the journey, those small victories along the way.
Right. Like, instead of trying to scale Mount Everest in one go, you're sort of setting up base camps and celebrating each one.
I like that. That's a great way to put it, because each of those small steps,
Mhm.
it reinforces the learning process.
Yeah.
And it gives you that little boost of motivation to keep going.
And speaking of mountains to climb, Ariel talks a lot about those initial fears that we all have.
Right. That fear of having a strong accent or making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember when I was learning your native language, I was terrified to speak. I would rehearse conversations in my head,
Oh, yeah.
but then I'd get in front of someone and my mind would go blank.
It's so common.
Yeah.
And it's something that Ariel addresses directly in their story.
Yeah. It's really reassuring to know that someone who's clearly accomplished so much still started out with that same kind of anxiety.
And I think what's so valuable about Ariel's experience is that they don't shy away from those moments, the stumbles.
Right.
They actually embrace the mistakes as part of the learning.
They do. There's this really funny story in here about trying to compliment someone's cooking,
Oh, no.
but accidentally using the word terrible instead of
Oh,
terrific.
my gosh, that's classic. I can only imagine.
Right. But the best part is Ariel was able to laugh it off,
Mhm.
and it actually turned into a bonding moment.
You see, and that's what we tend to forget, that those seemingly embarrassing situations
Right.
can actually turn into really valuable learning experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into something you mentioned earlier, that idea of exposure therapy.
Yes. That's a psychological concept. But
Right.
basically,
Mhm.
the more you expose yourself to something that triggers that fear,
Yeah.
the less power it has over you over time. So in this case, by making those mistakes,
Mhm.
by putting themselves out there,
Right.
even when it felt scary,
Hmm.
Ariel was building confidence and resilience.
So it's like each time you stumble and get back up, you're just getting a little bit stronger, a little bit braver.
Exactly. And, that's something that anyone listening can start doing right now.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait until you feel perfectly confident to start speaking English.
Right. Start small.
Yes. Find those opportunities to practice,
Yeah.
maybe in a low-pressure environment,
Yeah.
and gradually increase that exposure as you feel more comfortable.
And I think Ariel gives some really cool practical advice on how to do that.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they actually have a whole toolkit of techniques that they talk about,
Right?
and they break it down into active practice,
Okay.
immersion, reading, and writing.
Interesting. So it's really like a multifaceted approach.
Yeah. And what's cool is that they all seem to build on each other.
That makes sense?
Yeah. So let's start with active practice.
Okay. Active practice.
And I know this one might sound
Yeah.
a little strange at first, but Ariel swears by it. It's basically talking to yourself
Uh-huh.
out loud, like describing your surroundings, just narrating your day.
It sounds funny, but there's a lot of research that actually supports this idea.
Really?
Yeah, because when you're talking to yourself, even if it feels silly,
Mm-hmm.
you're forcing your brain to actively engage with the language.
Mm-hmm.
You're pulling up those words, you're
Yeah.
building sentences, you're practicing pronunciation, all in real time.
So you're essentially turning everyday life into a language learning opportunity.
I like it. It's like you have a built-in English class wherever you go.
Exactly. And it really emphasizes that learning doesn't have to be confined to those traditional, classroom settings.
Right. It can happen anywhere, anytime.
Right. And speaking of expanding beyond the textbook, Ariel is also a huge proponent of immersion.
Okay, immersion. Tell me more about that.
So this is about surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. Listening to music,
Yeah.
watching movies, even just having the radio on in the background.
I do that sometimes, but, sometimes I wonder how much I'm actually absorbing.
Well, and that's the key. It can't just be passive listening. Ariel really emphasizes engaging with the material.
Oh, okay.
So, try to understand the lyrics of a song, follow the plot of a movie, even if you have to use subtitles at first.
So it's really about training your ear,
Mm-hmm.
getting used to the rhythm of the language, even if you don't understand every single word.
Exactly. And honestly, sometimes it's more about getting that feel for the language
Yeah, yeah.
than understanding every detail.
And the good news is you can choose things that you actually enjoy.
Right. Like if you're a music lover,
Yeah.
listen to English songs.
Yeah.
If you're into movies, watch movies in English.
Exactly. That way it doesn't feel like a chore. It's something you actually look forward to.
Yeah, and that makes such a difference. So we talked about active practice, we talked about immersion,
Mhm.
but there's two more that Ariel talks about,
Okay.
and those are reading and writing.
Got it.
Let's start with reading, because
Okay.
I think a lot of people can relate to like picking up a book
Yeah.
or even an article in English and being totally overwhelmed
Oh, absolutely.
by all those words that they don't know.
Yeah, and it can be so discouraging.
Yes.
You feel like you're making progress, and then
Yeah.
you hit a wall of unfamiliar words, and it just
Yeah.
can really sap your motivation.
Yeah. But Ariel actually has some really great tips for making reading more manageable.
Oh, okay, I'm all ears.
One of the biggest things they say is start simple.
Okay.
Like, don't jump into Shakespeare right away, right? Find books or articles that are written for English language learners
Okay.
or that are on topics that you're already familiar with.
I see. So something that's engaging but not overwhelming.
Exactly. Something I find helps
Yeah.
children's books.
Ah, that's a good idea.
They can be a great way to ease into reading in English
Yeah.
because the language is so much simpler and the
Right.
stories are really captivating and fun.
And they often have, those beautiful illustrations too.
Yeah. It's like tricking your brain into learning.
Exactly. Making it fun. That's key.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to use tools like dictionaries or, online translation tools.
Yeah. I was going to say, technology can be a huge help these days.
Oh, yeah.
But, Ariel also makes a good point
Mm-hmm.
about not getting too hung up on looking up every single word.
Right. Sometimes it's better to just try to get the overall gist.
Yeah, let the context clues help you fill in the gaps.
Right. It's about finding that balance between expanding your vocabulary
Mhm.
and not,
Yeah,
not killing the flow of reading.
right. Because if it starts to feel like a chore,
Right.
you're less likely to stick with it.
Exactly. And speaking of actively engaging, Ariel mentioned a technique I've tried myself,
Oh, yeah.
reading aloud.
Ah, reading aloud. That's a great one.
It can feel a little silly at first,
Yeah.
but it really helps you connect with the words.
Mm.
And it's a nice change of pace from just reading silently in your head.
And it's great for pronunciation, too.
Yeah.
Really getting those sounds out there
Yeah.
and training your mouth to make those English sounds.
Now, we can't forget about the fourth element in Ariel's toolkit,
Okay.
which is writing.
Writing, all right.
And they talk about how keeping a simple journal in English
Mhm.
was really helpful for solidifying their thinking.
And this makes perfect sense from a cognitive perspective.
Yeah.
Because when you're writing, you're not just passively receiving information.
Right.
Like when you're reading or listening,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually actively recalling words,
Yeah.
applying those grammar rules, expressing your own thoughts and ideas.
It's like that saying, the faintest ink is more powerful than the strongest memory.
I love that. So true. Writing things down helps us remember them.
Yeah. And you don't have to write, a novel.
Right.
Ariel started with short journal entries, just describing their day, writing down their thoughts and feelings.
And, even things like writing comments on social media in English
Oh, yeah.
or sending emails to friends who are also learning.
Yeah.
It's about finding those opportunities to use the language in a real way.
Those are great ideas. It's about just weaving English into your daily life.
Exactly. Making it a natural part of your routine.
Now, one thing that really stood out to me about Ariel's story was their emphasis on connection.
Connection.
Yeah, like they talk about how interacting with other learners
Mm-hmm.
and native speakers was just as important as all the solo practice.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about studying in isolation.
Right, and they're very reassuring about it. They say
Hmm.
that most people are incredibly supportive
That's good to
of
hear.
language learners.
Yeah. I think sometimes we build up these scenarios in our
Yeah,
heads
yeah.
where we're being judged or ridiculed.
Right.
But in reality, most people are happy to help and be patient.
And they actually share a really sweet story about their first real conversation with a
Yeah.
stranger in English.
Okay.
They were nervous, of course,
Yeah.
but the person they spoke to was so patient and encouraging,
Oh, that's lovely.
and it really boosted their confidence.
It's those small interactions
Mm.
that can make such a big difference.
Yeah, a friendly conversation, a word of encouragement,
Mm-hmm.
those things can really keep you going.
It's about that human connection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really brings us to, I think, a really important point, the why.
The wow.
Why are you learning English?
Ah, yes. The motivation behind it all.
Yeah. Ariel talks about how their main motivation was connecting with people,
Mhm.
sharing their thoughts and feelings,
Yeah.
experiencing the world from a different perspective.
That's powerful.
So before we move on, I want to pause here for a second and encourage you, the listener, to think about your own why.
Yeah. Take a moment and really reflect on
Yeah.
what drives you to learn English.
Yeah.
What are your goals?
What are your aspirations? How will your life be different when you achieve them?
Yeah, because that sense of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
that vision
Mm-hmm.
is going to fuel you.
Right.
It's going to keep you motivated, especially when things get challenging.
Yeah. It's easy to get discouraged
Oh, yeah.
when you hit those roadblocks. But if you have that why in mind, it can really help you push through.
Okay, so we're back, and I don't know about you, expert speaker, but I've been thinking a lot about my own why.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's
Yep.
really powerful stuff.
Yeah, that just gives everything more meaning.
Mhm. It's like having a destination in mind makes the journey more exciting.
Right. So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive into Ariel's story,
Okay.
what really stood out to you, expert speaker? Well, I think for me, it was how Ariel really emphasizes the importance of consistency.
Okay.
It's those small, everyday actions that make a difference.
Right. It's like that saying, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. Fluency isn't built in a day either,
Yeah.
It's about those daily habits.
Right. Those little things that add up over time.
Yeah, like remember Ariel's story about their first real conversation?
Oh, yeah. With the stranger.
Yeah, their hands were shaking, but they did it anyway.
It reminds me of that other saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
So true.
Yeah.
Sometimes our biggest obstacle is ourselves.
Yeah. Those doubts we have in our heads.
Man, it's so encouraging to hear that most people are really supportive.
Yeah.
Patient with language learners.
It just shows you we're all human. We've all been beginners at something.
And that's a good reminder for anyone listening. It's okay to make mistakes.
You don't have to be perfect to start speaking.
Exactly. Embrace the journey,
Now, Ariel really focused on spoken English, right?
Right, which makes sense.
But I wonder if our listeners might have different goals.
That's a great point, because different goals might require different approaches.
Yeah, like what if someone's learning to, I don't know, write academically?
Yeah, then the focus would be more on grammar and vocabulary specific to that field.
Right. It's like a chef using different knives for different tasks.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the rewards are different too,
Yeah. Imagine being able to read a classic book
Yeah,
in its original language or, presenting your research at a conference.
so many possibilities.
So as we wrap up here, I want to leave everyone with a thought to ponder. Ariel's why was spoken English.
Yeah,
What if yours is something else?
that's a great question. What if it's reading or even translation?
Exactly. How would that shape your approach?
Something to think about.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you, expert speaker, for this amazing conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
And listener, I hope you're feeling as inspired by Ariel's journey as I am. Remember, fluency isn't a destination, it's a journey.
So keep practicing, keep learning,
And don't give up on your dreams.
never give up.
See you next time for another deep dive.